Believe it or not, it is December 20th. Christmas is coming. Hanukkah starts on the same day. It's like 50 degrees outside. It's a Friday, and I feel discombobulated. I'm Heidi Hatch with KUTV 2 News. Maura Carabello in the house, and Jeff Stenquist in his final week as an official representative of the Utah legislature. Thanks for being here, guys.
Nice to be here. I just realized it's my brother's sister-in-law wedding anniversary.
Happy anniversary to them.
Yeah.
Mine was on Wednesday. I forgot about it, and I got home from the gym, and my husband's like, hey, happy anniversary. And I'm like, dang it. Yes. I was thinking about it coming up. You should never get married the week before Christmas.
I was thinking, that's a busy time. It was
seems,
just when you had a
it seemed cute, I think, when we were in college and we were young and in love, and it was just like twinkly lights and prettiness, and we were like, this is dumb. You're always out of time, money, patience, and it doesn't work out.
Well,
and
I'm relieved to hear that it's not just husbands that forget anniversaries.
Yeah,
that makes me feel a little bit better.
It was me. I know. We usually just shake on it and say, let's not do anything and go out to eat. So
I'm 100% the forgetter in our relationship.
You are?
Yeah. I'll just own that.
Are we all ready, Maura, for Christmas?
I think we're getting close. We start what is a joyful, a lovely blessing to have. We're starting our marathon blended family. Like, we go to Denver tomorrow, family Christmas party, birthday, Christmas Eve, 4 more family Christmas parties. So I'm starting my celebrating tomorrow.
I always think I have a lot, and then I think about blended families like that, and then you times everything by 2 or 3 with the extra families. But you've got great driving weather tomorrow.
We got great driving weather. We've got some good parties coming up. I'll throw in a little bit of work. I don't know. I purposely didn't answer whether I'm ready or not, but I'm saying it's starting.
Right, I know. It's like the stress week. And you are joining the blended family world, so are you timesing everything times a bazillion?
Yeah, this is a new experience. Well, as a newly married person in a blended family, I grew up in a blended family, but it's my first Christmas together with my new wife and that blended family and our new kids, and the kids coming together. So that will be very interesting.
It's a chance to start new traditions. You should come up with something totally off the wall. Name it Hungarian. No one will challenge it, and be like, "This is what we do for you." The cutting of the Christmas spam or whatever. Like, make up something.
We decided poorly to do a complete house remodel.
Oh my goodness!
And we're still just moving back in and from that, so we haven't even thought about Christmas right now. So
I feel like I'm sort of the same, and I feel like moms are in charge of making sure the magic happens. And I feel like I've only been half-hearted this year because I'm in that weird in-between stage where my kids are kind of grown up. I only have 2 kids. My daughter's in California, not coming home for Christmas. My son's here, and so I wasn't really putting my whole heart and soul into it. And now all of a sudden Christmas is 3 days away, and I'm like, shoot, I've got to create magic for one kid. What do I do? Yeah, so I might be coming up with one of those new traditions too, because a lot of my family's out of town and it's just us, and I'm like, shoot, I got to put on a good show.
Yeah, you do. Okay.
So the pressure's on, so we'll report back in a couple weeks. Well, I think that part of what's keeping me distracted from getting the joy going with Christmas is there's just so much going on at work. Sadly, we've got awful news in Utah this week. We don't need to go into it right now, but I think my heart's feeling heavy over that. And there's just a lot going on. And as you might have guessed, Congress is like, should we shut down? Should we not? So, Maura, we're not surprised by this. Jeff, you were like, oh, I'm on it. So,
well, I think this is like a new Christmas tradition of Congress.
Every
we wait for a government
year.
shutdown right before Christmas.
True.
Yeah.
I honestly thought it was going to be different, though, because I kept seeing the pictures of Speaker Mike Johnson on Trump Force One, or whatever you call it. He was taking pictures at events with Trump. He was meeting with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. So I was like, okay, he's talking to Doge. Republicans are on the same page. They're going to drop something. Everyone's going to agree. They're going to get it through. No.
I'm still going to say that was all true. What you didn't factor in is, I'll say it nicely, Trump and Trumpland beats to their own drum. I don't think that they follow the cadence of normal body politic. I'm going to be grumpy and a little partisan.
Do it. Go all the way.
One, I'm going to say, I don't know that I'm a fan of Speaker Johnson, but I think Speaker Johnson is doing the impossible. And
it's a hard job.
I'm sorry, he had an agreement. And here's my criticism, legislative branch. Take a page from Utah's legislative branch. What are you letting the executive branch? I'm shocked that Congress has ceded the bully pulpit, their job, their basic duty, and nobody bats an eye when the coverage is all like, well, they got pressure from Trump or you know, Elon Musk, which is just a whole other thing. So I'm like, legislative branch folks, it's your job. And I hear this story
Don't they suck at their job though?
Musk.
Like, excuse my dirty language, but should they really release a 1,500-page bill with like 13 hours to read it before? That doesn't make sense. They've known since September, right?
That's our entire process of continuing resolution or budgeting. So that's clearly broken. But like, you just swept the board. You own all the Senate, House, I heard a Republican strategist this morning when she sort of asserted that, you know, this shutdown is on Biden's watch. No, it's not. No one's blaming Biden for like, we haven't even seen Biden for a while. So like, this is on the Republicans, and this is such a bad step forward. And I just want to grab the House particularly and say, you don't have to do this.
It's the theme constantly where we just need Washington. We need Congress to do your job. Congress, do your job. The Constitution has a clear separation of powers. If you are going to suggest to the legislative leaders in Utah, hey, you should just do what Governor Cox wants you to do and just fall in love with him, they would just laugh you out of the room. Yeah. That's crazy talk in Utah. They work together and they can take photo ops and there is a good working relationship, but the legislature does not take its marching orders from Governor Cox. Even in his budget proposals, that's always kind of one of the running things that, oh, thank you very much for your budget that you've worked 9 months on, and we're going to stick it under the table and to level the table, and the legislature's going to do what they want to do.
And then, Jeff, why isn't it an embarrassment, not to make you accountable for all of your fellow Republicans, but they also do not seem equally chagrined that they're basically taking marching orders from a private sector dude whose qualification is being rich. I mean, one can say he's also a successful businessman, but this is like, is Michael Prince the richest person in Utah?
I don't know.
That's a one-off.
What does he do?
Anyway, I don't know. I just know he's building a big house in Park City. And whenever they
now I want to Google
a big
him.
house in Park City, they always say the richest man in Utah. Anyway, to take marching orders from a private sector person, still, I'm like, what is going on? Why are you not flexing your legislative muscle here?
I find that shocking.
Like such a lose move for the Republicans.
It sounds like Russia. Like, is this an oligarchy?
Yeah, right.
I mean, what's going on here? Elon Musk is not an elected official. You've got a speaker, and we have a system of. I mean, full respect to Elon Musk for all of his accomplishments, and I'm a technical guy myself, so I love the science and technology. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, hey, come in and throw your money around and you get to tell the government what to do.
So I love a good framing, right? And I think that politics is around framing and branding often. And I thought that the Republicans very successfully framed 2024 elections as Democrats are incompetent. Democrats aren't getting it done for you. Democrats can't run systems, i.e. immigration, blah, blah, blah. Whatever that list was, the base premise, sort of the underlying through line was Democrats can't get it done, they're incompetent.
Yeah.
And I'm going to come in and, if you're listening directly to Trump, his first 24 hours are going to be the busiest 24. This is going to be like Kris Kringle-like activity on day one.
It's going to be busy.
He's going to be busy. But this does not frame up that storyline for a January start date when you can't do your base budget.
And you had, when Biden came into the administration, he came out with just a long list of executive orders.
Right.
And which, I'm sure Trump will do the same thing. But that's not how constitutionally we should be governing. Congress, do your job, please.
Yeah, and so the interesting thing is there's talk now that possibly today before midnight they could split it up and vote for the continuing resolution and then look for some of the emergency funds we need for some of the emergencies we've had across the country, then a farm bill, which I think makes sense. I mean, it's what legislatures do. They vote on things one at a time. So it's like, okay, let's get it done. I spoke to Senator Mike Lee yesterday, and he obviously has frustrations that are often different than the Republican Party, but I think he sounded frustrated by President Trump's last-minute call to get rid of the debt ceiling as well. I know some people say, it doesn't really matter because we're not following the budget anyways. It's just this weird, thing that we say we need to raise, but we spend the money anyway, so who cares, get rid of it. And there's others saying, like Senator Mike Lee, we can't just raise it without getting some real work done on the budget and making sure that there's, some controls in place. So, Maura, is there a reason right now that we'd want to get rid of the debt ceiling, or should we keep it there and, like Senator Mike Lee says, let's fix the budgeting process before we just take off all the stops?
Challenge with raising the debt ceiling is twofold. One, we have a debt problem, but two, it's so anti-traditional republicanism. Like, it is, again, I'm shaking my head going, well, wait a minute, do I need to start holding down like the Republican side here? It's so not a Republican
I know,
thing.
Democrats were like, oh, we're doing that? Okay, let's go. Let's go.
But it's sort of like, where are you taking folks if you're talking about raising the debt ceiling? And as Lee said, it's largely maybe maybe a guidance or a philosophical approach, but I don't know many, and I'm going to give this to Republicans and Democrats, but I don't know many people who are staring hard at the budget, inflation, the debt ceiling, all of which are slightly different issues, right? And looking and going, you know what we should do? We should spend more on the credit card. Like, that's the solution. And I'm going to apply that to also Democrats. Like, I think most people who are staring hard at these programs know we need to do something. And so this notion that the person who has been declared the voice of the Republican Party is sort of asserting to Congress, I don't even know what to do with it. It just seems so upside down.
And I was shocked to see, honestly, that not only did President-elect Trump say we should remove the debt ceiling, in his statement, he wanted to do it now so he could blame the Democrats for doing it. Like, he just blatantly said that. And so obviously, one, it's kind of performative and being able to say, well, okay, it wasn't my fault, they did that. But then opening the door to saying, okay, now we can add more to the debt without having to run into this obstacle. And I think he did lose a lot of Republicans in asking for that, because a lot of the fiscal hawks are not going to, they absolutely don't want to go for that.
Well, you saw them breaking with the Democrats, right? How crazy was that?
Yeah, I think there was 38 Republicans, and people were blaming back and forth, saying, oh, let's primary him, because Celeste Malloy voted in favor. She said it was the first time she'd voted for continuing resolution, one of her reasons why it was Trump-backed. And then Burgess Owens voted for it, John Curtis, and now I've just lost who else we have here, who I just listed up. Yeah, Blake Moore voted against it. And so I think there's a lot of nobody knows what side they're supposed to be on, because they're like, we're going to primary you, and you're all getting primary. That's the new thing.
I'm giving demerit points. I like our delegation, but I'm giving demerit points for any independently elected official who's saying, I'm doing this because the president told me to do it. I'm like, you are one of only 6 people I have representing me. If you're just going to look at him, I need someone who can actually independently think.
And it's abdicating the responsibility of the legislative branch to be that checks and balances. That's what we need to have in place. We don't want a dictator in the White House.
Before we move on for the budget, I want to understand how you do it at the legislature. Obviously, you do it in a lot more separate bills. There's not just a giant omnibus you pass. But one of the complaints when I was speaking to Senator Mike Lee yesterday is that he calls it the law firm of Schumer, McConnell, going through Jeffries and Johnson right now, that they go behind closed doors. The 4 of them make a deal. They call it bipartisan and then pass it, the day before they give it to you and say, you either got to vote for it or shut down the government. How do you come upon those decisions in the legislature? Are a lot of those made behind closed doors with the Senate president and the House Speaker, where they come up with something and then you vote on it? Or is it more collaborative at the legislature?
You're touching a rod nerve for me, because
let's touch it. You're done with your job. Say what you want.
Exactly. The appropriations process in the legislature, it's certainly better than what you have in Washington, but there still is, you have all these subcommittees, and every member of the legislature gets to sit on a appropriations committee and have some input, at least into that segment of the budget. But then all of those budgets from the subcommittees get sent to the executive appropriations committee, which is leadership, and then they do whatever they want with it. And I often,
thanks for your work, we'll do what we want.
I became a little bit jaded, because I would sit through hours and hours of committee hearings and all of these things, and we would set our priorities, and even though you had a committee and you got to sit in it, you really didn't feel, I never felt like I really had any real say in the budget, unless you're on executive appropriations, and really, which is the majority is the Republican leadership as well for that. So there's some input, but at the end of the day, leadership can pretty much do what they want.
And this power consolidation is relatively new. It's been done via process and rules in the bodies themselves. These aren't things that necessarily need law changes. They're things that can be very subtly changed by an individual leadership team. And often it's not wholesale, it's just tweak after tweak after tweak. And I think when you look up and look around, in the last 15 years, you actually do see a significant but subtle shift to having the power be arguably disproportionately in the hands of 7 people. Where before it was, now, I mean, as someone left of center, before you were always saying, well, it's in the hands of the majority always, but that's about election victories in some ways. And so, but I feel like in the 2 decades that I've been following the legislative budgets, you know, when I started, I would tell you that 25 people, maybe even 30 people really had a hand. And I'll show you like behind the scenes as someone who works a lot with lobbyists. I mean, it is well known that you do your due diligence in committee, you hope that wins the day, but at the end of the day, if you can get the ear of 1 or 2 people and they will wield their authority in the closed door of executive appropriation, you're probably okay if you can get it there.
And the chairs of the appropriations committees do have, you know, they basically, the chairs would bring out, okay, here's the prioritization that we have, and members of the committee can make motions to make those changes, but very rarely would that happen. So unless you're at one of those chairs or on executive appropriations, you really, you know, I oftentimes would play hooky on some of those appropriations meetings because you were so busy doing other things anyway. It wasn't a good use of time, I felt.
So the power goes to the few most of the time is what we're learning here everywhere you go.
We do balance our budget.
We do a very good job.
I give a high five for that. That's why when we start to look back historically, like there's a little glow around former President Clinton for me. Well, I think there's a lot of things to look wrong about. I'm like, that was the last time here in the United States of America we had a balanced budget. We were all thinking about Monica Lewinsky, but think about the budget.
Yeah.
And
I thought Clinton was a great president.
You know, and I will say that, you know, Republicans, you know, we're known for fiscal responsibility where we want to be, and yet at the same time, you know, it really comes down to what you want to spend money on. Really, there's a lot of hypocrisy there. There's a lot of hypocrisy on the Democrat side as well. And I would say that there's hypocrisy from the American people as well, because on the one hand, we don't want to pay taxes and we don't like budget spending, but then we want the things that we want. I mean, I love the things that were in the budget that were my priorities, but not the things that I didn't want to spend. So it's really just a matter of what you feel like the priority should be, and everybody's got their hand in that pot, especially in Washington.
Speaking of priorities, top of my mind, just because I had an interview with Senator Mike Lee yesterday. I was going through some of the bills that they had just passed or were working on, and I'll talk about them in just a minute, but Utah's delegation worked together as a team and passed a few things that are important to the state. Senator Lee, though, looking for ways to cut from the budget right now. He's introducing America First Act. He wants to remove federal benefits from illegal immigrants, saying, you know, if you're here legally, then, you know, we can look at giving you all the programs that come socially, whether it's WIC or food stamps or Medicaid, Medicare, that kind of stuff, but says if you're not here legally, then that's money we shouldn't be spending. Maura, does this make sense to you, or is this hurtful to people in the country already and it causes more problems and more money down the road? I
think this is superficial virtue signaling. I don't think this is a significant line item in a budget to be taken seriously as a spending cut. Now, had he coupled this with a dozen other insignificants to make one significant, maybe, but when you take out the favorite beat them over the head topic by the Republicans and you're like, oh, coincidentally, that's where I also want to make some budget cuts, I just see this as a political issue that he can get some traction on. I think if you're really serious about comprehensive budget reform, first you start out with knowing the timeline that the 3 of us know, September. So why don't you get to work out on right now? Like, why don't we know that September's our deadline? And you can't...
Oh, they know.
They can't correct the ship by a little here, a little here, a little here. They need to sit down. They need to get serious. It needs to be joint. So when we see these one-offs, I'm a cynic, and I just take this as a political demonstration. But hey, right on brand, right on Republican brand. So I mean, he gets some credit maybe from a PR position, but I do not think this is a serious financial discussion he's having.
I agree with that. I think, honestly, Michael, Senator Lee knows how to kind of, get that base going. And, I noticed there was that bill that he proposed, beating on the, everybody's favorite punching bag, the immigrants, to blame everything on. Second of all, he suggested on Twitter that we let's just get rid of Vote My Mail. And I again, one of those things that he has no jurisdiction whatsoever, because elections are held at the local level, but it's something that he can get score a few political points at, and as well being able to say, well, maybe we should have Elon Musk as the speaker, which again, something he has no jurisdiction and no vote on because he's in the Senate. So, but just little things like that he does a very good job at that.
Two issues that you just mentioned, Governor Cox spoke about in his monthly news conference. He doubled down on his support for Trump mass deportations. Earlier, he said specifically we would only look at helping the federal government if people had committed crimes, they were in the legal or the prison system. He sounded a little more broad on that. And then he also said on the other issue where you mentioned mail-in ballots, that he would be willing to stand behind that. Maura, when you listen to these two issues, they're definitely talking points for Republicans. Is he only talking about them because people want him to talk right now, or what do you get from those?
This re-round of these topics came out in his monthly. So first and foremost, hats off to the governor for continuing to have monthly. And these monthlies are great because they're pretty wide open, and people do get a chance to ask him what he wants. So first and foremost, he's doing what we mostly want him to do, which is standing up and giving opinions. I like that he gave opinions on both. I have been critical, I'll continue to be critical of his position on immigration because it just seems so political and he's not tethering it to any reality. So one, could we just first and foremost settle that there is not one Utahn who does not want a violent criminal to be locked up? And so to attach immigration to that, that's when I'm like, oh man, y'all are just playing politics there. Like, there's no one who's like, well, I don't care, I really want the violent drug criminal. The other thing is, you're already performing a criminal activity. You don't need to add the immigrant part of it. And we also have to remember that by and large, immigrants commit crimes at a lower level. But also remember that your status as a civil detainee. Law enforcement doesn't actually, when we talk about cops and sheriffs, people with badges, they don't have a lot of jurisdiction for civil issues because it's equivalent to not paying taxes. And this is equivalent
and they
to
don't
saying,
come arrest you for that.
You know what, you should go profile and decide who you think is most likely to not pay the taxes. And when you see someone that fits that description on the street as being a non-taxpayer, you should probably pick them up. And you should probably do a background check and see if they have paid their taxes or not. So one, are we talking about jails, which are a pretty big issue? Are we taking law enforcement time, strength, and energy and really actually suggesting that they should be focused on civil detainment? Because that's not where I want my law enforcement. I live in Salt Lake City. One, first and foremost, I'd like y'all to pay a little more attention to homelessness. I would like you to pay more attention to violent crimes. We're one of the worst states in the nation for sexual assaults. I'd like your time spent there. So I get frustrated with the bifurcated violent immigrants who have criminal records absolutely should be priorities. But then I see it just wrapped in what I see as just this political machination on immigration that has exhausted me. I join the group of people that say our immigration system and our borders are broken, we should fix them. But throwing politics at it, that's not how to fix it. That's how we've kept it broken for the last 30 years.
It is something that the governor, he's throwing a bone to the hardcore part of the Republican Party, saying, yes, of course, if it's a violent criminal and that's an illegal alien, sure, let's deport those people, without going too far on. First of all, it's not the state's and local government's responsibility to enforce immigration, and generally that's not where the focus is, and that's not what they do. It's the federal government's job to have a working immigration system, which we do not have. the solutions to this are not that difficult, but it's because it's politically expedient, they won't solve the problem and come up with a good system because they just get too much political benefit from it at this point, and it gets really frustrating. And there are a lot of I know that in Utah we want to have a vibrant economy. There are a lot of sectors of our economy that really have enjoy that where they need that labor, construction, tourism, other industry sectors that really need the workforce, and we need to have that immigration system that helps support our economy as well. That's I think something that a lot of people forget about. Agriculture, for example, is another one, and so having a broken immigration system really hurts our economy as well.
Who we should be calling for is ICE to step up their action, not local law enforcement.
Exactly.
Should local law enforcement work with ICE on criminals? Absolutely, but they already are. You're not finding any law enforcement member who is being held in a violent crime, but when you deport to Venezuela, that's not a Grand County Sheriff problem, that is an ICE problem. And ICE is bureaucratic, they're heavy-handed, they're non-communicative, they're not great at their job. So if we're gonna holler at somebody, I don't think we holler at local law enforcement, I think we holler at local ICE, because there are jurisdictional ICE people. They need to step up their game.
And probably like most federal agencies, they're underfunded,
For sure.
under-resourced.
Yeah, and tough to get an interview with. I've tried in the past.
Really?
And
They're
they don't talk. Here's one thing that can be celebrated. Utah's delegation, as much as we hear about these issues that everyone's yelling about or kind of the hot button issues, our congressional leaders are there to support Utahns and talk about issues that are important to Utah. They did pass through a couple things that are now headed to the president's desk that are important to Utah. Not the sexy things, but they're things that are important. They passed the Great Salt Lake Stewardship Act, the Mountain View Corridor Completion Act, and that takes 200 acres of federally owned land from Camp Williams and makes it go to completing the corridor there that we obviously know that we need for traffic purposes, and the Utah State Parks Adjustment Act that also transfers some parcels of land as well. So not very sexy to talk about, but they're important to Utah.
They certainly are, and that's really a lot of the function of government. Just do the mundane things to keep things moving along and get keep out of people's lives and let people commute to work by completing a road or whatever. I'm excited about some of the things. First of all, it's great that our delegation is focused on let's just get some things done, let's solve some problems for our communities, and not just pander and shake sabers and things like that. So it's good to see that they're out there trying to solve problems as best as they can, within the system that we have.
I've been following the very sexy Great Salt Lake Stewardship
You
Act
have.
for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you're a water girl.
I do love this one. This one is so clever because it just rewrites a section and allows for a reallocation that already exists. This is just what Jeff said. This is just really good government. Looking back, seeing the tweaks. But let's use this as a time to shout out to, I don't know why I'm giving him a promo, but John Curtis is listed as one of the most productive members of the House of Representatives. I'm going to get this wrong, but did he pass 20?
24 bills, I think.
Is that right?
I think I
well,
heard
let's
that
say
number.
24.
Yeah.
Who's going to correct us?
Yeah.
All right, I'll have to double check.
An amazing number of bills, considering I think Congress only passes 25, right? And he's 24 of them. That's totally made up, but it sounds impressive. I mean, Curtis, so that means in my mind that he's focused on probably tweaks that make a difference. He's focused on coalition building, and he's focused on policy. And I think that would be terrific if he takes that on over to the Senate with him. But we should congratulate John Curtis for being prolific at passing bills.
I think he's an excellent representative.
Yeah.
He's my representative as well. And I also really like the state parks one. Having worked a lot with state parks and recreation in the state, seeing that happen. And I'm excited that actually not passed by our delegation necessarily, but there's a big recreation bill that passed through and is on Biden's desk, which is going to be very helpful as well to open up more opportunities for outdoor recreation.
More is more here in the great state of Utah if we can get outside and play.
And we spend so much time recreating on federal land that's managed by the federal government in the state of Utah that's really important. And I'm excited about actually some of Trump's picks for Interior Secretary and some of these other positions that are, I think, going to be good for public lands policy in the state of Utah.
Yeah, I think they're
Absolutely.
rough.
I'm gonna love him.
You are gonna love him. I'm gonna weep.
It'll be an exciting new year of watching the cabinet picks go through. I picked a bad last topic because this isn't very uplifting, and I know it gets Maura a little riled
a
up.
little sassy even with the hook of it.
I know, and so I was interested in this last week that President Biden came out and made a call for gun control after yet another school shooting that none of us are excited to see. It's heartbreaking every time. But interestingly enough, it came after a week prior when we had an execution-style killing of the United Healthcare CEO with a ghost gun. And that story is getting all kinds of headlines. And I personally think it's insane that people are so enraptured with this guy because he's good looking and killed someone, and so it may have been for a great cause. But we had a really brazen shooting that captured the headlines, and nobody called for gun control, and especially with the difference of a ghost gun that was printed and made up of, of his own, where it wasn't tracked by the government, wasn't registered, nobody cared. But then the school shooting happened and we cared. And so I guess I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on this. What are you thinking?
Well, and let's also mention that it came shortly after President Biden pardoned his son for gun crimes.
I mean, it was a registration issue,
but
Jeff. Let's
still,
not get over crazy about it.
But the shooter that killed this CEO, I mean, it was a product of this indoctrination that CEOs are bad and big companies are bad, and then a lot of the people that are now hailing him as a hero. It's really disturbing and upsetting that we would do that in this country, and then again use something like that, a ghost gun, and then use it to say, well, we need an assault weapons ban. It makes no sense. We're just using a tragedy for our own political purposes and for our own political talking points. It's really sad.
Do you feel like that's happening? Because I guess in none of these issues, this most recent school shooting, oddly enough, was a young woman, which we don't usually see. It was a handgun, I believe, and then same thing with the guy in United Healthcare. Is this just political posturing, or do you think that there's, a way that, President Biden could do something on his way out and say, hey, let's do something, let's make some change?
Well, I mean, the executive actions don't work on guns. We know that. Speaking of Biden's position on ghost guns, which is what I thought was a little unfair of saying, oh, look, he did it here and didn't do it there. Is it disingenuous? No, I mean, if the President of the United States, if anyone in the United States would like to make a declaration about the need for gun control after every shooting in the United States, that's what they would be doing all day, every day. An American is shot and killed from gun violence every day, all day. Multiple Americans are. 2022 executive order with the ATF, the Biden administration went all in on ghost guns. And it's just now finished being litigated in the Supreme Court in October of this year. So Biden has doubled down on ghost guns, which are really, really scary because they don't show up as guns until you're pointing them out. I mean, there's the amount of problems, and I believe that regardless of your position on the Second Amendment, we should all be worried about ghost guns. And why do you need them? This is so far away from hunting. It's so far away from protecting your family. I think there is this question of how do you conceal these weapons, and why do you need, and I don't mean from hidden view, they don't look like a weapon until you put them together. There's a lot of questions, but Biden, the administration, has aggressively taken executive action on ghost guns. It got challenged by the Republicans, it got challenged in court. We're seeing a decision, and it sits at the Supreme Court level. So one, I would challenge anyone who says the Biden administration hasn't taken and made a point about ghost guns. I think that the reality is, my view of this is, yeah, absolutely, he takes the opportunity to speak about gun control when it involves children because it's the public relations behind it. So I do think there was some strategy to when you talk about it, but I think to challenge Joe Biden's position on wanting to restrict access, time, place, and manner, put normal restrictions around guns, I think Biden's been pretty clear about his record, and for me, it's a record I can stand by in which he does think there should be more limitations. Why I didn't talk about it? I mean, I agree with you both. This CEO killing has been a
bizarre,
weird glimpse at us, an unattractive glimpse at us.
Disturbing.
Apparently, we think it's okay sometimes to kill people. So that for me is a different issue, but I'm not going to bust Biden's chops because if he were going to call out every piece of gun violence, one, it wouldn't be popular, we'd all get tired of it, it would lose its efficacy, but two, go look up what he's done on ghost guns. He has a record on that, and yeah, absolutely, he's platforming, for better or worse, something tragic. I mean, the only hope I think many of us feel like we have in getting serious about time, place, and manner restrictions on unnecessary gun violence is to point out how much it's affecting our children.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't have answers. And here in Utah, we had the man who shot his wife and children this week. We have zero answers right now as to why that happened. So I know there's always a lot of questions that come with that. I'm sure we'll keep wrestling with that issue in the years to come. Before we go, though, do you have any goals for the politicians that live around you that you would like them to know about as we head into the year? Would you like to set them for them?
Unexpected.
I know, you can think about it.
I need some goals.
Okay, how about I'll ask this. Are we going to shut down the government tonight, or are they going to pull it together, put their big boy panties on, and vote on something?
I am going to be sassy because I hope by sending this out there I'll be so wrong. But I think we're going to shut it down. I think we're going to shut it down like over the weekend.
Just a skosh real quick.
And which will annoy me even more that you're that stupid. So I think we'll have a weekend shutdown. I think they'll rally. I think they're going to, I think the Republicans are going to think that this is somehow a way that they can recapture that they got this together. And I think hopefully we will all just turn off our television, or we'll turn on, it's a what's the Jimmy Durant, it's a Miracle on 34th.
There's Miracle on 34th Street, and it's a great life. What is that called?
This is sad, but
It's a wonderful life.
It's a wonderful life. I know. I'm like, it's a great life.
I'm not ending this declarative very well. So I say let's turn it off our televisions and not even find out. But I think we're going to shut down for a few days.
Okay. Are we going to shut it down?
And honestly, if we shut it down, it's not the end of the world. I think that, as we've seen in the past, when this happens, life goes on. And, in the past, they've put fences around the Washington Monument that for no reason other than just to show that, well, the government shut down, so you can't do that. I know that in Utah...
That to me is so dumb. Just let the people walk to the Washington Monument if they would like. It's just like, what?
It can have an impact. Of course, the federal workers that don't get paychecks, they don't get paychecks for all, but they will get paid eventually. Things will work themselves out. It's not the big, horrible crisis that everybody makes it out to be. It's fine if the government shuts down. We can live a little while without the government.
I think it's a little stressful for those federal folks if it goes on for too long.
Yeah,
it is. But really, it's just giving the other party a stick to beat you with.
Totally, it's just pointing out incompetence. And they're doing it to themselves. So I don't really get that.
So if you're using the Utah gorgeous weather this weekend to say hike Arches or Zion National Park, make sure you have good hiking shoes on, because you might have to sneak around some gates to get in and do your hiking or whatever. There's going to be no open bathrooms, so pack your
open bathroom.
Pack your poop out. Yes, so bring yourself a doggy bag. Yeah, so anyhow, it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out. We are at the end of the year. We're going to take a break next week because we all deserve a Christmas break. So thank you so much for being here, and hopefully all the politicians pull it together and give us a joyous new year. Here's for hoping.
Hopefully.
Yes.
I have not met my new